jump straight in. So we are in chapter 321. It is we scheduled to go from halacha 15, but with your permission, we'll go from halacha 14. And I'll tell you why. Because chapter 321, Shin Chaf Aleph, covers a number of different malachot, and the malacha of lash or lisha starts at 14. So if we would start with 15, we're like jumping in and skipping the introduction. The Mishna Brura usually always gives helpful introductions when there is a new concept being discussed. So the new concept here, helpful introductions when there is a new concept being discussed. So the new concept here is lash. And he starts by saying, before I explain the Shulchan Aruch, I'm going to explain a little bit of lash. It is one of the 39 malachot, and it's not only through water, it's through any kinds of liquids that is going to mix the solid together and create some kind of paste, like we mentioned. And as I said earlier, the real challenge with translating this is that we don't have an English word that actually is for lash, lisha. So he says we find that if you put one guy puts in flour into the bowl and the second guy puts in water into the bowl. So the first opinion says that the guy who put the water in is chayev. In other words, that's the malacha. You've added water, that's the malacha. And there's a second opinion that says no, it's only a malacha once you've actually mixed it together. And the majority go like that second opinion. However, in other words, it needs to actually be mixed together. But there are others who say, no, we follow even the first opinion, just putting the water in with the flour is considered lash, is considered this creating this mixture. Then the Mishna Brura says, but all this is where we're speaking about flour or sand or something like that, which when you pour in water, it actually creates this mixture. It creates dough, mud, whatever else. You get things that you mix them together, like cereal, porridge. You put it in, it creates this mixture together. But what about something? Now that's something that's called bar gibul. Bar gibul means it can create a mixture through doing this. So that's something that's bar gibul. Now you have plenty of things that are not bar gibul. The example would be beach sand. When it comes to beach sand, you can't make mud out of beach sand. It just doesn't, especially coarse beach sand. Well, maybe, fine beach sand you can do it, but like that kind of coarse beach sand, you know what I mean? You can't make mud out of that. So what about that? That's lav bar gibul. So he says, on that, there's a machloket rishonim. The Rambam says that even if you do mix that together with water, you haven't done the malacha. It's asur d'Rabbanan, but you haven't actually done the malacha. Then many other rishonim say the opposite. So in the notes, he says it's Tosfot and the Rosh and the Ravid, the Rashba and the Ran. Okay, so many others say when it comes to that kind of coarse sand, then it's actually worse, because from the second you've added water, that's already considered it's needed. So just to kind of lay that out again, what he said, this is an important introduction, that lash is creating this mixture. Two opinions in the Mishnah. One is that the second you've added water, that's considered creating the mixture. Second one is no, you actually have to mix it together. That's all speaking about flour. Most follow the second opinion that you actually have to mix it together. However, what about things that you can't mix together? So then again, we now have two opinions. One is, well, that's good in a sense, well, it's better. It's never going to, then it's not relevant to ever talk about making a mixture. The other opinion says no. Then you're chayav. As soon as you do the full extent that you're going to make that mixture, you're never going to make. You've got this coarse sand and water. You're never going to make it more of a mixture than when you've added in the water, and so therefore immediately it's lash. Whereas the other opinion says no, lash is only when it reaches that stage. So is it an objective thing that lash is when you have created this kind of paste, or is it a subjective thing? Lash is when you have made the best mixture that you can make with this thing. The Rambam says it's objective. If you haven't brought it to this level of mixing, it's not lash. Rosh, Tosfot, Ravid, Rashba, Ran say it's subjective once you've done as much lisha as you can for this one. Now, that's the Mishnah Brura says is the introduction, and then we go and look in the Shulchan Aruch. So what? And they use this word gibul quite a lot in Shulchan Aruch. So gibul, I would normally translate it as kneading, but that's not the way they're using it over here. Again, they're using it in the context of mixing. The Ramah says netinat mayim bekemach, placing the water in. So it's making the mixture. So even if you've got roasted flour, so this kind of roasted flour is not going to make dough. So you can't add a lot of water to that, because maybe you're going to come across some flour that hasn't been roasted and is going to make dough. So that's where the Shulchan Aruch starts with this, of saying, in some situations, even if it doesn't look like you're going to end up creating this mixture, we can see that that isn't going to. That you can see that it's going to be that's going to be a problem. And he discusses variations on this. Now, again, I don't want to say problems. I don't want to make it sound like Shulchan Aruch is a problem. It's a solution. But we've got to do quite a lot of work to make it a 21st century book of halacha, because the Shulchan Aruch was written very differently to the Rambam. The Rambam wrote his book to teach you the concepts. This is what the concepts are. These are the laws. The Shulchan Aruch wrote the book as a guidebook. When you're eating this kind of food, this is how you do it. When you're eating that kind of food, that's how you do it. Why is that difficult for us? Because the difference between daily life from 500-600 years ago and today is very substantial. And so all the examples that the Shulchan Aruch is giving are not usually that helpful to us. So that's the problem. If it was the Rambam and he's discussing the concepts, then we'd see it. But since it's the Shulchan Aruch and he's discussing the way of life, that's why we have to quite a lot of work, and that's why I'm also not going to go through every example. Okay, so now he says you are allowed to mix another kind of flour, because it's like sand, and you can mix it with vinegar or something a lot at once, as long as it is rach. So now again, the words we're going to be using, the key words are av and rach. Belila ava, belila racha. Av, thick, racha, literally like soft. The correct English terms: high viscosity, low viscosity. Highly viscous, highly viscous and not highly viscous. So viscous is a thick mixture. If syrup has a higher viscosity than water. So he says you can mix this together as long as it is rach, as long as it is not viscous. But if it's a different kind of flour, then that's a problem, because it looks like you are doing lash, and therefore you need to do it with a shinui. So that's another concept that he's bringing in here when it comes to lash, is the ability to do it with a shinui. So what is the shinui? Do you guys know? What's the number one shinui when it comes to creating a mixture? So, the answer is the order. The number one shinui is the order. Normally when you're making a mixture, what order do you put things in? Solid and liquid. So there are many times that we're going to permit it through a shinui, which is where you put the liquid and then the solid. And so since you're doing that, that's creating that's creating a different kind of mixture. Or it's a shinui in the way of creating this mixture. Yeah. Let me see what else the Mishnah says here. Yeah, and then the Mishnah Brura says, coming back to the argument that we mentioned earlier, even though there's an opinion that says when it comes to things like the coarse sand, which can't make a real mixture, so there's the opinion, the Rambam says, therefore it's not gibul, therefore it's not going to be lash. He says that's only doraita, that's only for a chiyuv. But even the Rambam would agree that it's asur. So everyone's going to come out now when it comes to like making this mixture with this coarse sand or whatever. That's going to be problematic. Okay. So one of the questions the Mishnah Brura asks is, let's say you're stuck out in the wilderness, you're camping or something. You don't have toilets around, so you want to go to the toilet. So can you make a wee on the ground because you're now mixing that together. So he says there is an opinion that this is mutar, and he says you can rely on that in a case where it's not like your garden or something. See, there's another issue of the plants, but it's not really good liquid for making plants grow. But he says you could rely on it if it's not your thing, because you don't want to create mud. If it was like your own area, maybe you would think it's good for the soil to create mud or something, but that wouldn't be the case over here. And so there is an opinion that gives a heter for that. Yeah.
So, can you also use the heter of, like, I don't know, for some reason there's like a wall in the wilderness? Can you or like the tree? You go to the bathroom on the tree, having in mind that it's not going to go onto the grass.
But it would go onto the grass, wouldn't it?
Doesn't make a difference.
So that's called the psik ratio. But it's not going to make the grass grow. Remember, Zoraya is about making the grass grow.
I learned that before.
Yeah, it's acidic. It would make the grass grow. Okay. Then he goes into a discussion around mustard, that you want to mix mustard and put in honey or something like that. So he says, don't, lo yitrof la'arvo. Don't, like, what's the word? Whisk it. Don't whisk it, stir it. Mix it little by little. So this is the second shinui that's coming in over here. Is that rather than whisking, you stir. You rather than stirring it with force or whisking it, you stir it gently.
Where are we?
We are shin chaf aleph tet. We've just finished tet vav, going on to tet zayin. So even a little bit of background. We're talking about the malacha of lash, which is creating a mixture of solid and liquid. For example, flour and water, tachina, a number of things like that. That's mud, making mud on Shabbat. So the three factors that we've seen so far, 4 factors. Number 1, is it going to create like a paste? Like Prenutro does create a paste. Cornflakes doesn't create a paste. So the one that does is called bar gibel. The one that doesn't is called lav bar gibel. Are you talking about a highly viscous mixture? A mixture with a low viscosity, that's blila ava or blila racha. Blila ava is more problematic, viscous mixture. The next factor number 3 is the shinui of order. Normally you first put in the solid and then you put in the liquid. Sometimes if you do it with a shinui, that you put in the liquid and the solid, that makes it better. And then point number 4 we've seen is the shinui of the creation of the mixture. Normally you create it by whisking or stirring it. The shinui is to create it by doing that much more gently. The Mishna Brura actually points out a spelling mistake in the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch says, Lo yitrof la'arvo bekach. Don't stir it in this. Rather mix it mat. So the Mishna Brura says it should be bekoach. Don't do it bekoach. Don't stir it strongly. Okay, then he speaks about another kind of ingredient, another food that they would have crushed Erev Shabbos, and he wants to now add some liquids onto that. So he says you can add wine or vinegar, but again, don't stir or whisk it, but rather mix it. And he gives a few other examples. The Ramor says, when you're talking about these examples, some say that you can't, even when we're talking about mixing it, that you can't mix it with a spoon, but you have to use your hand. And the Mishnah Brura says, or mix around with the bowl. So that's now a third form of shinui. So we've seen three different shinui. The order, the kind of mixing, and then within the kind of mixing, some even say, don't mix it with a spoon. It's interesting, the Mishnah Brura doesn't give a ruling on that I can see. He doesn't say, what do we follow? A whisk would be similar to a spoon, but probably worse, because that's made for this kind of creating a mixture. Then some say that, remember we said you've got like this mustard paste and you want to add more oil or whatever else. Some say you can only mix it if you can only mix it up if you already added the oil before Shabbos. But if you didn't add the oil before Shabbos, you're not allowed to add any other liquids today because that would be considered lash. But then the Ramah says, however, even according to that opinion, it says it's problematic if you would first put the food. If you would, if you would first put the food, he says. So again, it depends on what's the normal way with this item. This item apparently normally was the liquid first. So therefore, he said, if you do it the other way around, we first put the food and then the wine and the vinegar, and you mix it with your finger, then that would be fine because that would be a shinui. And the Mishnah Brura adds in the notes again that this discussion is only talking when we're talking about a blila ava, a viscous mixture. But if it's a blila racha, then it isn't going to be a problem of shinui. Lash. Thank you, Evan.
So the shinoi works like chila.
Shinui. So this is what's tricky about this. And I mentioned this a few minutes ago. There are cases where he gives the shinui as a lechachila. But he doesn't tell us the principles. He doesn't tell us in this kind of situation, you can use a shinui. In this kind of situation, that's not good enough. He's giving practical examples. When you're doing it with mustard, and when you're doing it with cooked flour, and when you're doing it with but we've now got to take that and try to translate it to porridge and prenutro and tahina. So there are times, but there it could already be that there are enough good factors. We're not talking about flour and water, so just do it with a shinui. So shinui can be lechachila given the right circumstance. Sometimes shinui is the last thing you need to bring it over the line to permissibility. And then the Ramah makes this point that I made a minute ago about the order. He says the shinui is to do it in the different order to what it's usually done. If it's usually you put in the solid first, then the shinui is to put the liquid in first. You usually put the liquid, then the solid. Okay, and then he says, the Mishnah Brura says, when it comes to vegetables, that's called salatin. Anyone guess what that is? Salad. So what's the salad vegetable? What's the number one salad vegetable? Lettuce. That's what they say in the notes. He's talking about lettuce. He says, if you're cutting up lettuce, so they're making some kind of lettuce salad, if you go and mixing and either like salad dressings or whatever, he says, since you're not cutting it up so finely, that doesn't ever end up being a problem of lush. But when you're talking about something like cucumbers, that you are making them very, very fine and then pouring on vinegar or something like that, and you mix them together, you do need to be careful. Don't mix it strongly with a spoon. Just shake the bowl itself, and it's actually better to first put in the vinegar and afterwards put in the food. So even salad and salad dressing can be, if it's like we're talking like an Israeli salad, like even that can be an issue because you had this chopped up cucumber and tomato, and now you add a bunch of salad dressing, mix it all together. So now you've created a porridge out of cucumber and tomato.
That's the same as like coarse beef sand because it's not really like.
Correct. It's not a bar gibel. But remember what we said a few minutes ago is that according to many, that's even worse. If it's not a bar gibel, it's even worse because then you're chayav simply by putting them together, even without making it into the real mixture. And even according to the Rambam, who says it's better because it can't ever become a proper mixture, the Mishnah Brura wanted to say that's only as far as Doraita. The Rabbanan, the Rambam would still have a problem with it. That's what he wants to say.
I assume it's the same with mayonnaise.
That would be the same with mayonnaise. Yeah. Then he says, Then he says, now according to now he says you're not allowed to beat eggs in the bowl because of marit iron. Why is beating eggs marit iron? So this is not really an issue of lash, actually, because when you're beating eggs, you're not mixing it with anything else. But since we're talking about whisks and stirring, whatever else, the Mishnah Brura just brings in another halacha. So what's the marit iron of beating eggs?
The egg was laid.
No, I'm not. He doesn't say that. I mean, it could be there's situations where that's what it will look like. But I think mostly for us, we all know you keep eggs in the fridge or outside the fridge. Yeah, because when you beat eggs, normally what comes next is you put them in the frying pan. Right. So if you're beating up eggs, it looks like you're going to be putting them in the frying pan. What if they were already beaten erev Shabbos? So then possibly you could put them in soup or something. That was what they used to do. It's a klisheni or something like that. Okay, but the point that I just wanted to make that point that beating eggs is a problem on Shabbos because the Marid Ayin, it looks like you are going to cook them now. Then he continues about soaking various things, right? There's some kind of things that you would want to soak them on Shabbos, but that's going to be a problem because again, it's like kneading. Even though you're not soaking them in order to create a mixture, you're soaking them so they'll absorb the water. But that's essentially what you're doing is you're creating this mixture of these solids and liquids. Okay. Yeah.
A liquid and a liquid's no problem. A liquid and a liquid.
Liquid and a liquid is not an issue. Yeah, that's not an issue at all. Okay. Let me see the next one. But again, I just make this point again that it's quite hard to have the real takeaways from this section of Shulchan Aruch clearly because the way he's teaching it is all through outdated examples that we can't relate to. So we really need someone to tell. And even the difference. It seems to me that the difference between our food and the Mishnah Brura's food is greater than the Mishnah Brura's food and the Shulchan Aruch's food. So there's still hard for us to relate it exactly. Mishnah Brura keeps talking about borscht, and the borscht, and and that's and the Shulchan Aruch talking about other things. So there is some overlap, but there's not as much overlap as we would like.
Sushi and soy sauce, he doesn't discuss it.
It's a good question. Sushi and soy sauce. I tell you where that would come up, like a sushi salad.
Yeah.
Right, or a sushi cake. The actual sushi thing itself, I don't know that we would say because it's just like putting lemon onto your fish. Yeah, lemon juice onto your fish. But if you're talking about a sushi salad that you're adding soy sauce to or something, it's a fair question. I think it's a small enough amount that again it's like adding flavor rather than creating a mixture. Whereas with the Israeli salad, he's talking about the Israeli salad with vinegar. Even with salad dressing, maybe it's just sprinkled on the top. Israeli salad with vinegar, he's talking about making this the mixture. It's like a vinegary salad. Okay. Then the next thing he goes into
Sorry,
yeah.
Can I ask,
You
what
can.
about making cereal? I'm saying like Cocoa Pops and milk.
Yeah.
How would you do that? Can you do it normally?
So it seems like with cereal that would be okay, unless you want to say the cereal's like the coarse sand. If you want to say cereal's like the coarse sand, then you're in trouble. But if you don't say that cereal's like the coarse sand, then you're fine.
So from now on, you have to pour your milk and then your cereal.
No.
For Pronutro, that's definitely a problem because Pronutro is like flour and water. But if it's something I'm actually going to get, especially because this is Dirshu, which has got more updated notes and everything.
Are you looking for the English one?
Sorry? I'm not. I'm getting out the Shmirat Shabbat Kiddush for sure. Even though it's a different sefer, the whole thing of Dirshu is that they've got all the updated notes. It's really, the idea of Dirshu is that you're really learning 3 books. And I'm not saying that as a criticism, but that's just to understand. We're learning Shulchan Aruch, we're learning Mishnah Brura, and we're learning to carry it into the 21st century, and we're learning these notes. Here we go. Let's say Dinei Lisha B'Shabbat, chapter 8, page 7. So let's see what Rav Shlomo Zalman says. Where Rav Neuwirth says on the name, much of it is in the name of Rav Shlomo Zalman. Okay, so now he says the Lisha is only forbidden by the Torah or even the rabbis if there are these three conditions, mixing together two different objects, that they are somewhat fine or ground up, and that as a result, these two different things become mixed together in one mixture. Yeah, and he says it could even be, he gives an interesting example, mixing honey into cottage cheese, or cream and cocoa powder.
Yum.
Yeah, that does sound nice.
Hot chocolate.
Hot chocolate. Hot chocolate could be different. This is more like chocolate mousse. See, hot chocolate, you're just dissolving a powder into a liquid. You're not creating a kind of mixture or paste. It just gets dissolved.
That's even worse for you.
Okay, now let's see if we've got a section on Shabbat. Okay, so he says if we're talking about a thick mixture, a blila ava, he says then that's asur doraita. But even a blila racha is asur dorabanan. But they permitted a blila racha if you do two shinuyim. One is the opposite order, and the other one is mix it in a different way, either with your finger or through shaking around the bowl. And then they talk about if you need to use a spoon, then don't stir it round and round with a spoon, but go left and right and up and down. So that's the second. So this is how I remembered it. It's hard to see this exactly from the Shulchan Aruch and Mishna Brura, but this is how Shmirat Shabbat Kel Chator comes out. Thick mixture, right, so that's a problem. You're going to make a thick prenutra, don't even start. Thick porridge, don't even start. Thin mixture, mixture with a low viscosity. We can do it, provided you do both shinuyim. It's both. So see, Evan. So this answers your question. According to this, answers very neatly because a blila racha is the rabbanan to begin with.
What's blira?
That's low viscosity, liquidy mixture. So a blila racha is the rabbanan to begin with, and you're doing two shinuyim because you're changing the order and you're changing the way in which you do it. Now he says, what if you need to make a blila ava on Shabbat? Now, need to make it on Shabbat? Well, is it going to save a life or something? He says because if you would make it from Erev Shabbat, it wouldn't last, it would spoil. So I don't know what he means that you need to, but okay, maybe it's for the baby food or something. So then you should place a little bit of the liquid in the solid Erev Shabbos, and then mix it a little bit. And then the next day you're just like adding on, and you do it with a shinuyim. Okay, we won't go into those details. To see if he goes into anything specifically about the cereal or whatever. You are allowed to add sugar or any other soluble into, let's say, cream and mix it around. That's not lisha, but you can't do that to like cream cheese. So I guess it was like milk. I think it's the difference between milk and cream cheese. Again, one you're just dissolving it in a liquid. The other one is you're creating this new kind of mixture. Okay, he's got a section about like formula or milk powder.
Can you make milk?
Can you make milk powder? If you want to make milk powder or formula for children, if it doesn't dissolve immediately, then what should you do? Sorry?
Shake it like this.
Yeah. But he says first add a little bit of hot water. I think their formulas were not maybe as soluble as our formulas. I mean, our formula, everything just dissolves straight away. It's like not an
Not
issue.
always.
Okay, hot water.
Coming from Sam, the baby expert.
Yeah. So he said you should change the order.
Every
So I
morning.
guess that's a good. Normally if you would add the thing and then the solid first and then the liquid. So now you do it. You change the order. Have we got anything else? Okay, so any other questions? That's where I would think we would look. He speaks about techina. That was what CD was saying during Mincha. So, ein lahaktzif b'Shabbat techina. You can't be maktzif techina. So what happens is you mix it with water and whatever, and then it makes a thick mixture. You're not allowed to do this, even if your intention is. So what happens is, this is what CD was saying. It starts off quite liquidy, but as soon as you add water, that actually makes it thicker because of the way the chemicals interact or whatever. So it starts off quite liquidy. You add the water, it makes it thicker, and if you keep stirring, it ends up being liquidy again. So he says, well, that's a problem. That's a problem. To create that thick stage is a problem, even if your intention is to eventually make it liquidy. Okay. Because you want to mix it together. The part of the mixing together, part of the process in the middle, it ends up thick. Okay. Now he says, let's talk about garlic. He goes now at the end of this chapter. So this is the whole chapter is about food preparation. So, that's kind of, and again, it's Shulchan Aruch was written as a practical guidebook, not a theoretical study of halakha. We're using it as a theoretical study of halakha, but that's the challenge. So you're dealing with garlic, and you mash the garlic Erev Shabbos, but it still needs to be mashed more on Shabbos. Are you allowed to do that? Yes or no? You are not. You're not allowed to. You're not allowed to. Not allowed to Shabbos. They only need schika, like I don't know. That's like a little bit of crushing. Then that's fine. If you do almost all of it, then that's not a problem. So. Yeah. Again, it's another kind of example that I'm not too clear on. Now there's another. So the next question that I'm going to ask is memachek. Now this is an important one. Memachek is like spreading, right? Smoothing out. Couple of classic examples of memachek. I'm a carpenter and I'm making a chair, but the chair is still rough. So I take sandpaper, smooth out the chair. That's memachek. Or another one is I've got wax. And it's like a lump, and I smooth out the wax. That's memachek. This is why we don't use solid soap on Shabbat, because it's memachek, smoothing out the soap. And this is the problem that many have with toothpaste on Shabbat. You're smoothing it out over your teeth. I saw a child here playing with like Play-Doh on Shabbat. So I said, we don't play with Play-Doh on Shabbat. She says, why not? So I said, because it's memachek. I don't think it's memachek. I said, we're going to smooth things out on Shabbat. That would be the same kind of issue, or pressed it.
Also molding.
Would it be molding? So what would that be?
What
melacha is that?
Building.
Building.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, did you say building? I don't think it's, I think it's hard to say it's building.
Because
Because even Lego isn't building.
But I guess that's.
So then why would plastic? Then why is plastic not?
I think it's memachek. I think it's the same thing with memachek. You're smoothing it out.
what about like slime? Yes, you're smoothing it out, but there's no use of it because you're just gonna plop it back in your tub.
So yeah, so
goes back to
at
normal
what is again the level of viscosity when it comes to smoothing out? That's the question comes up again. The level of viscosity. How runny does it have to be before it's no longer memachek? You're just playing with this floppy thing, right? And when is it that you're smoothing it out? Slime, you're just playing with a floppy thing. You're not smoothing it out. So they asked Rav Moshe Feinstein, can you use liquid soap on Shabbos? Liquid soap on Shabbos. So he said no. That's like the one chumrah that Rav Moshe says that nobody else agrees with. Rav Moshe normally was not known as a big machmir, but that's one chumrah that I heard in a shir recently that even members of his own family use liquid soap on Shabbat because it's just like. But that's what he said. He says memachek. You're taking the liquid soap and it's, like it's a bit solid and you're now smoothing it out. So presumably he'd have an issue with slime as well. But we do everyone uses liquid soap today.
And you have issue with liquid toothpaste as well.
So he would possibly he would. So that would be the issue. The same issue with lipstick, by the way, apart from the issue of tzorveya. So let's say lip ice. Lipstick, one problem is coloring. But lip ice, the problem is also in b'machek. So you'd have these liquids. Now, the question, I'll just say what the question of the Shulchan Aruch is, and then we'll come to your question, Yehuda. So he says, now what about avo? I want to put avo on my sandwich. Or even butter. Or margarine. Or banana. Right? All of these things I want to do mamachek. So the Ramah says you are allowed, this is an important one, you are allowed to smooth foods on Shabbat. This is not mamachek. And the reason that he gives is because it was edible without this. In other words, I haven't actually done anything. I haven't done anything.
So, Rabbi, whenever you're ready, the refreshment will do the test in the back, so the guys can come and take some tea.
Super. What time would you like to start the test?
What time did you start? About 5 to?
No, a little couple minutes after.
Let's go any time between 9 and 5 to maybe.
Okay.
Those, but no, give or take.
So he says the whole thing with an avo is an avo, and it's a completely edible avo. Whether you're munching it, or whether you've spread it and you're munching it, it's the exact same.
Isn't it the exact
Whereas when it comes to the chair, whether I'm sitting on a smooth chair or a rough chair, it's different. I've changed the chair, right? With the toothpaste, whether it's in the bottle or smoothed out over my teeth, I've changed that. It's not usable in the bottle. I can't do anything with it on the toothbrush. I can't do anything with it on the toothbrush. What am I going to look at it? Once I've smeared it over my teeth, now I can do something with it. But with the avo, that's not the case. I can munch the avo as an avo, or I can smooth it and then munch it. But because it's edible either way, it's not a problem.
So it's not really
In theory, if you would have something that was, you couldn't eat it unless it was smoothed out. You can eat it once it's been smoothed out, but if it isn't smoothed out, you can't eat it. If there was such a thing, you would not be allowed to smooth that out on Shabbos. But it doesn't seem that there is such a thing. And that's the wording of the Ramah. You're allowed to smooth out foods. I remember that. I'll tell you why I make a point of this. Because when I was in yeshiva, learning halakha with Rabbi Goldstein, we used a different halachic book. And the phraseology was so confusing. He said, if you can eat the food without smoothing it, then you're allowed to smooth it on Shabbat. So we spent like 5 minutes discussing and trying to work out what is a food that you can't eat without smoothing. And for months and even years afterwards, I sat with that question. What was he talking about? But if you look at the Ramah is saying different. You are allowed to smooth foods on Shabbat, since foods are edible even without smoothing them. He's not talking about some kinds of foods. He's explaining why you're allowed to smooth out foods. However, he says, if you are machmir with foods like apples and things which are smoothed out, you'll get a bracha for not doing it. Now, I don't know if he's talking about boiled apples or quite what. I mean, how are you just going to pass me an apple? I'm going to spread it on my toast. I don't know exactly what he means about the apples. Ma'achal shel tapuchim, some kind of apple paste, I would imagine. Then he says you'll get a bracha if you don't do it. So in other words, the Mishna is not, the Shulchan Aruch Ramah is not crazy about the smoothing of foods, but he says it is permissible. And then the last point that he makes is peeling. Peeling. He's going on garlic and onions. Are you allowed to peel garlic and onions on Shabbat? What's the issue? Before we say yes or no, what's the issue? The issue is borer. The issue of peeling onions and garlic is borer. Therefore, if you're doing it in order to eat it immediately, that's permissible. If you're doing it in order to do it later, then that is impermissible. Yehuda.
I don't know my question anymore. It's fine.
Great.
I forgot my question.
Fantastic.
With margarine, you don't really have a stick of margarine.
You don't, but you could. It is edible. It's not eaten that way, but it's still edible that way. That's the idea.
I'd love to see
Um,
block of margarine.
Yeah, so then he says, but the Mishnah Brura says, look, even though the Ramah says, look, it's better if you don't do this thing with the apples, but he says, but if you want to spread boiled apples on bread or cream or anything like that, definitely it's fine. So it sounds like there's not even a chumrah in that situation. Bavadai shari. Good. That's the end of chapter 321. Now we're on to Shin Chaf Bet, chapter 322, which is Nolad, another somewhat confusing concept. So, what's the idea of Nolad? Yeah. Basically, the idea is if it didn't, as I understand it, if it didn't exist before Shabbat, then it's muktzah on Shabbat. So, in theory, now it's a little more complicated when it comes to like eggs and that kind of thing. But in theory, let's imagine so an egg is laid on Shabbat. So that means before Shabbat that egg didn't exist, and now that egg exists. So that's problematic. Now, the truth is, as I say, when it comes to eggs, it's a little trickier because the egg did exist. It was just inside the chicken. And the rabbis knew that. So that's why I'm oversimplifying it. The halakha doesn't oversimplify it. But just to give you that example. So nolad is something new that comes into the world. And that's basically like muktzah. Why? Because the Torah says, "B'yom hashishi hichinu et asher yaviu." On the sixth day, they must prepare what they'll bring in. Prepare on Friday. In other words, what you can have on Shabbos is what was on Friday. If it wasn't on Friday, then it can't be on Shabbos. Yeah. So now he says, if an egg was laid on Shabbos, it's asur even to move it. And then, now there's not a Shabbos issue, this next one, but it's an interesting halakha. Even if it got mixed up with 1,000 other eggs, all of them become asur. So,
Just on Shabbos.
come to that in a second. So, you got this egg was laid on Shabbos, so it's muktzah. Why? Because it's nolad. Wasn't in the world before Shabbos. Now that gets mixed up with other eggs. Normally, the rule we should say is, how many should you need to negate the egg? So, it was a bit of a trick question. Really, it would just be majority. You just need 2. See, shishim, batal b'shishim, the rule of 60 to 1 is when there's a mixture of tastes. And we say, if you've got 60 of a different taste and only one of this taste, you're not going to taste this taste. But here's not an issue of taste. It's a different kind of bittul. So actually you just need 3. So if you've got 3 eggs, 2 of them are kosher and 1 is not kosher, that's fine. You can take an egg and eat it. Definitely can take 2 eggs and eat it, and probably you can even take 3 eggs and eat them. But with this isn't the case. Not only is it not the case that if you've got 2 other eggs, even if you've got 1,000 other eggs, it's no good. This is what's known in halakha as davar sheyesh lo matirin, something which can become permissible. And this is related to what Nissan said. Since after Shabbos you're going to be able to eat this egg. This is not a treif egg. This is a treif for now egg. If something is treif for now, so the rabbi said, well, then don't apply the principle of bittul. Don't say, well, we'll negate it amongst all the others. Just wait 24 hours. You'll be able to eat all of them. So therefore, bittul does not apply to a davar sheyesh lo material. Bittul is only when there's no other solution. You've now got 1 treif egg mixed in with 1,000 eggs. What are we going to do? Okay, we'll go after the majority. But there's no, what else are you going to do? Throw away all the eggs? You don't have to throw away the eggs. But here with davar sheyesh lo material, you've got another solution. Just wait 24 hours. Since there's another solution, bittul doesn't apply. You understand?
I've always not understood this. If you put 3, we know when you put eggs in a pot, you must put an odd number of eggs.
No.
Is that not true?
It's a myth. It used to be true. It's no longer true.
Why?
Why? Because we now use battery eggs. The whole thing of putting in odd numbers of eggs was that we wanted to have, if 1 egg was a treif egg, we wanted majority of kosher eggs.
Then why, if you've got 4, why can't you put 4 eggs?
So that's also true, right? So they say, well, what if it's going to be 2 treif? But if you're going to put 5, what if it's going to be 3 treif? So that is never is a lot. That's the thinking at least. But nowadays it doesn't apply anyway. Because if we use, what does it mean a trafe egg? A trafe egg is not an egg with a blood spot. A trafe egg is an egg with a baby chicken inside. Baby chicken you're not allowed to eat, and the whole egg becomes trafe. Now in the olden days, when they saw a blood spot on the egg, that could mean that this was a fertilized egg, and therefore there was a baby chicken inside. But nowadays, the hens never see a rooster. They are definitely not baby chickens inside. If you see a blood spot, that's only a little bit of blood from that chicken that made it somehow into the egg. But it's not, the egg isn't trafe, you just take out the blood spot and throw it away. So what do you even need majority for?
Tradition.
That's the exact reason why. That's exact. So I had an argument with a mashgiach about this once. I was at Bnei Akiva camp, and I went into the kitchen in the morning. I wanted to cook myself some eggs, so I think I put in 4 eggs. So he said, "You're not allowed to do 4 eggs. It has to be an odd number." I said, "No, it's fine. I can do." He says, "No, you can't. It has to be like this." I said, I'm just finished my smicha, or I was just finishing my smicha or something, like I do now. He says, "I went on the mashgiach's course. That's what they told me." So, but I mean, we can laugh. Look, it's good that he's stuck with his mandate. The mashgiach should not be pushed around by every Tom, Dick, and Harry who knows who claims to know halacha better than him. Even if in my case, I think I did. But I did check this with Rabbi David Goldfein, and he said, yeah, I mean, today it's battery eggs. It's not even what we call free range. They don't have any contact with the roosters. So therefore that you wouldn't have to have.
That rule, so the 1 in 1,000.
Yes.
The rule, or did it say you had a function? So,
Yes.
And you was getting eggs with the mitzvah.
That's right.
Now, it still would apply.
That would correct.
No,
That
the egg
still would
could
apply.
be wasted because...
That's right, exactly. Yeah. It's a good point. So in other words, you'd say, well, here the only solution is bittul. Yes, for the function, the only solution is bittul. But for the egg, the solution is to wait. So you know what I'm saying? So that's so yeah. We would then say we would arrive at the Friday night dinner for 1,000 people. Everyone gets an egg, and then we discover that one of those eggs was laid on Shabbat, whatever Shabbos day, Shabbos lunch, I think. One of those eggs was laid on Shabbat. Sorry, everyone can't eat your eggs. That might be a little bit different. I'll tell you why. Because this halacha is when they're all gathered together. What you're asking is once you've taken one out. That's a different halachic mechanism. So actually, I don't want to commit to that. Because if it's already on your plate, that's fine. But let's say you've got a mountain of eggs. Like they'll sometimes have these caviar things or a chocolate fountain or whatever. So they've got a mountain of eggs. And one of those eggs, the question is each of the guests wants to go up. No, that you can't do. Once it's already on the plate, that may be a different thing.
What black food tradition are you still supposed to do an odd number?
That is a good question. I wouldn't think so. Some people might say so. There was also a tradition of an egg pot. Because you might end up with so many trafe eggs, you actually have a separate pot that you only use for eggs. So I also never got this. So Rabbi Beryl Wine gave a shir once. And he says, halachically, there is no reason why you would need an egg pot. But I say to my students, if you don't have an egg pot, I'm not eating in your house. So, in other words, he wants to know that they're keeping. But I don't know. To what extent would you say that? I don't know. Sam?
I don't know how this would happen, but like, let's say you got your hens that are laying eggs, and then they all like roll up into separate like things, and they each get like one, and then it happens, Yoda. It doesn't.
Yeah, carry on.
Only in the movies. Okay, whatever. Okay, then the guy clicks the button, and all of them roll down into one big thing, but just before, like it's on Shabbos.
Yes.
If none of them were laid on Shabbos, but in order for them to go into the one thing to be taken inside, he needs to click the button. Are you allowed to eat from those eggs?
Okay, so it's a good question. That comes back to the ones we discussed earlier. Is the malacha done by a non-Jew on Shabbat? And was it done for Jews? Was it done not for Jews? Did he have other options? Didn't he have? So it's a good question, but it isn't so much on this section. So we'll leave that one for now. Listen.
If you don't take out the blood spot, then it's a tray.
No, you just can't eat that blood spot. But I'll give you an example. If you're eating an omelette and they didn't check the eggs, are you allowed to eat that omelette?
Yeah.
Or if you're eating a boiled egg, how do you know a boiled egg? How do you know?
That's what
Boiled
I'm
egg's
saying.
different.
That's why
Boiled egg's different.
Why is a boiled egg different?
Because they're already cooked as a solid in the hole. Even when you had one.
So how do you know if you're eating? Yeah, no, but I'm saying
Yeah.
you're eating the boiled
That's
egg.
what
How
I'm
do you know
saying.
it wasn't a blood
That's
spot?
what,
no, no, no.
that's what I'm saying. That's what maybe you should still put the odd number, because if you don't see the blood spot, then it's still true.
No, because no, it won't be trav. The blood spot will be battle bashishim.
Yeah, but it's not.
And even that blood might not be an issue. Just by the way,
So you
even
don't
that
have
might
to
not
check
be an issue.
eggs anymore. You don't
But
have to
also
check
boiled
eggs.
eggs.
Let's say
We check eggs.
Let's say, for
but,
example, there's you've got an egg, right? You pour it. You know there's a blood cell in there. Then you see, if you and then you like try set it aside. Then what's if you like, I don't know, your brother comes and pours it in the pan. You know there's a blood spot in there.
Yeah.
So you know then you know.
Yes. Yeah. So then you would say, is it a 1 in 60? 1 to 60. 1 in 61. If there is, well, then you're certainly fine. And I'm sure there is. If there isn't, then you can look at it.
It doesn't make like the whole yolk not kosher.
No, it doesn't. Oh, that again. The time that it makes not only the yolk, the albumin, the whole egg becomes not kosher if it is a fertilized egg. A fertilized egg, the whole thing isn't kosher. But a battery egg that has a little blood spot,
How do you know the difference?
only just a little bit of blood that's mixed in. How do you know the difference? Any commercially produced egg, there's no, they never in their lives meet
It's mass production.
a rooster. If you go to a farm where there's chickens and roosters running around and the farmer serves you some eggs, then you now have to talk about the odd numbers and the egg, and then the whole thing will be trade. That's the definition. Okay, so now he says, now I've got this egg sitting on the table, and it's an egg, right? My farm helper brought in this chicken's egg, and he says, here you go, boss, laid fresh this morning, puts it on the table. So what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
I can't eat it. It's Shabbos. So can I cover it with something so that it doesn't get broken? Because for muktzah, are you allowed to do things for muktzah, but they don't touch them? Answer is yes. You are allowed. Even though you can't touch it, you can cover it. And the egg is unique among muktzah. Normally with muktzah, you can touch it. You just can't move it. Often hear people say, muktzah is things you can't touch on Shabbat. It's not true. You can touch on Shabbat. You can touch a car on Shabbat. Car's muktzah, you can touch a car. Muktzah is things you can't move on Shabbat.
If you touch a car, you might move the end, like a little.
Oh, I'm
wire
sure.
or
I'm
something.
sure.
No.
If you sit on the car,
However,
you
with an
probably
egg, if you touch an egg, you would move it.
Well,
I'm
if
sure
you-
on a molecular structure, if you touch anything, it's gonna move. No, God. No.
Not sure.
You do this.
Yeah.
What
If
about
I
if
do
you jump on a
this-
car?
And if I do,
Sam, no matter.
Okay, I
if
think you
touch
understand the
it or not,
principle.
it's moving. It's
Okay.
going down to the molecular structure of
No,
something.
you know, just touch it, not if it's
Now, what if fruit falls off the tree on Shabbat? Are you allowed to go and eat those? No, same thing. How long do you have to wait after Shabbat before eating those eggs? You do not. You do not have to wait. Second Shabbat is out. You can eat the fruits. You can eat the eggs. You can eat everything else.
And is it the same if someone picked it?
Is it the same? Someone
No,
picked it for
you
you?
know
That's
the
going back to
answer.
Sam's question.
you know that answer.
We
Yeah.
pretty sure we
You know
learned
that
with eggs
answer.
that were laid until you have to wait the amount of time.
It
It
took
would have
for the
taken,
man
yeah.
to go there, get that egg, and bring it
I'm
back.
pretty sure we learned it in this year at the beginning of the month. Maybe
Um,
it was something
I'm pretty
else.
sure we didn't learn that.
Yes, we did. That was for
Yeah.
picking up the
Eggs
fruit.
or fruit?
Yeah, it
The
was for
man had to
fruit.
go kilometer, pick the fruit,
Yeah.
kilometer back.
here we
Give it
go.
to you.
So he says, "Just material, but time the ajat yachlin v'tavlena be'chashash ishu yot there's yamdin ajtekshach." I don't see that.
And then we
I
have
don't
the
see
problem
that.
with, what happens if it's with the calculate the time in the car or on foot.
Yeah, Yoda, I don't see that. So I can't. If you can show me, then I'll say it. But, okay.
Accepted.
Let's go a little bit further. So now he says, what if I want to take some straw and use it as a toothpick, but it's like a little bit too big. So I want to like break it in half or cut it or something so I can use it as a toothpick. Is that considered that I am making a utensil on Shabbat? So he says, no. He says, no. Why? Because it's food. It's animal food.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Talking about, hey, animal food is not, you're not making a utensil. It's still food. You're using food for something. So using food for something is not problematic. However, if it was a wood chip that is not animal food, that you're not allowed. That you're not allowed to take and break and use into this
Do
or
you
that.
ever eat it?
So this question can move like cooking on Shabbat. If I put a challah in the oven with pounds fish,
Yes. So that
is
is.
that not allowed? I mean, or you're not allowed to do it, or
So that wouldn't be no. I'm not. This is a good question whether that would be no lad because it existed as dough. It didn't exist as
Yeah, I think we.
Didn't we also
Yeah.
go through that?
as
Aren't you
as
just
bread.
warming it? Or you say it's cooked already?
no,
No,
it's
it's
No,
not.
no,
Oh,
it's
not
taking
dough.
dough, putting a
Oh.
colour dough.
Oh no, you can't do that, can you?
No, you can't. Look, when it comes to cooking, there's another factor. Rabbi Goldman pointed out the whole malacha of cooking on Shabbat is a groma. You never cook the food. Your stove cooks the food. All you do is you put the food on the stove.
I never
So
said.
that's the structure of the malacha. It's different to most. When it comes to most things, you're milking the cow, you're killing the animal, you're sanding the chair. But when it comes to food, you aren't cooking the food. Fire's cooking the food. You're just placing it and taking it away. So there could be a bit of a different dynamic. Maybe that was an interesting insight that Rabbi Goldfein had.
Oh, I've got a question.
1 second. Vanilla sticks on Shabbat. Are they muktzah?
Yes.
Try again.
What's a vanilla?
Correct. Vanilla stick. Do you know what vanilla is? Excellent.
It's food.
It's not food, but it can be food.
ingredients.
Can be food,
Ingredients
yeah.
and cake and that.
Or a cinnamon stick. These are all things for scents and flavors and that kind of thing. So even though it isn't, food, it's a stick, but it's a fragrant stick. It's a special stick that has a smell. Okay, let's just finish up this chapter quick because it's not a long chapter. So now you're handing out sweets on Shabbat at your Shabbat table, and you've got some lacquer ones and some nyeh ones. Are you allowed to make like a lottery to say you're going to roll the dice, we're going to pick things or whatever else, and the one who gets this will will be like so. So he says if they are basically the same, and the only reason you're doing this is to avoid one saying, "Oh, how come he got a bigger piece than me?" or whatever. Then that's fine. He says, but if it's
So you can't play the chocolate game in Shabbos.
but if it's with people who are going to really get upset about it, he says then it's not allowed because they're going to end up measuring and weighing, and you're not allowed to weigh and measure on Shabbat. So people are going to take out their rulers and they're going to measure. How come my piece of cake was 5 centimeters, your piece of cake was 5.5 centimeters.
Isn't it buying and selling?
But
it's also a separation period.
But then he says, well, what about if you want to do it like a game where you'll either get, we're just finishing up this chapter, where you'll either get the big piece or the small piece. So I'm going to say, okay, you heard it in SM. I've got a big slab of chocolate and I've got just this little chocolate. Now we're going to roll the dice, and whoever gets the higher dice roll, are you allowed to do that?
I think even during the week.
The Shulchan Aruch says you're not allowed to do that even during the week because it's gambling. Exactly. Some say you're allowed to do it like with your family because it's not really gambling, it's just like a fun game. And then the Ramor says you're not allowed to do like an actual kind of lottery on Shabbat, even to get a non-Jew who's going to be dealing with it. So that's where we're going to end it off. And please God, we will continue. Shkaya. What about it? You should call it rock, paper, scissors. It's more politically correct.
Rock, paper, scissors.